Welcome back, this is UIX Part 10, where we're going to be talking about layouts and the various layouting options available. I'll be covering 3 today, but there are others which are more less frequently used. The 3 that we'll be covering are grid layout, horizontal layout, and vertical layout. I'll also be talking about how they work and how you can use them within your UX to lay out items. I'll also be providing examples of where you can sort of see these layouts being used, even if they're not actually being used. Sometimes they're sort of laid out manually, but places where you might want to use them or places where you can see them in action and see how they're useful. Let's get started. First, we're going to show you the layouts in action in front of me, and then we'll start building some of them. So if I hop over here into Smooth POV, you'll see that I've got the layouts spawned up here. These are also available in my public folder. They are under UI stuff, UIX examples layouts. You can find all 3 of these available, so you can spawn them and take a look. So on the left here, we have grid layout. This arranges items in a grid. You can see this within your inventory and within the world browser. Both of those use grid layout. Next to that is a horizontal layout. You can see there are 3 equal red rectangles aligned horizontally. You can see horizontal layouts on things like rows of buttons. For example, the buttons at the top of an inspector. I'll show you this in just a moment when we open Inspector. And then the last one on the right here is the vertical layout, where it arranges stuff vertically. So you can see here 4 equally spaced, equally sized red rectangles. So you can see these commonly on things such as forms. And when I say forms, I mean things such as the login screen for Neos, or even the settings panel for Neos, and also inspectors as well. Let's go ahead and get some of these going. You're just going to need a developer tooltip to do this. So I'm going to go ahead, turn to the left here, and we'll get started. The first thing we're going to do, and this video might run a little bit long, so do check the video description and the video area for some chapters. We'll be going into setting up a template canvas to be used to demonstrate these layouts. Let's go ahead and get started. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to spawn out that UIX template. I'll turn on my private UI just for a second here so you can see where it is again. I use this pretty much every UIX video, so you should know where it is by now. It's in my public folder, UI stuff, UIX templates, and it's that black square on the right there. So we'll spawn that one in the world, and then I'll turn off my private UI again. Actually, just before I do that, this here is a vertical layout, and these buttons here are perhaps, I don't actually know, but they resemble a horizontal layout. So there you go. Let's turn off that private UI, move the camera to one side, and equip my developer tooltip. With my developer tooltip equipped, I'm going to go ahead and inspect this square. So secondary, open inspector, and we've got our canvas template open. The first thing I'm going to do is create a slot beneath this, which will be the slot which contains the layout. Layouts are based on hierarchies, where things inside a layout's hierarchy, so the layout here and then inside the layout's hierarchy, get layouted. So we're going to create that parent object. This is very similar to all of the alignment components, which I'm quite a fan of, including axis aligner, circle aligner, object grid aligner, all sorts of stuff like that. I'll put some links in the video description to those components. Those are used for aligning stuff and arranging stuff in 3D space, and these layouts are used for aligning stuff in UIX space. So let's hit start, which will create a new child. We'll rename that child to layout. And then I'm going to add an image to it such that we can see it compared to the surrounding items which we lay out within it. So I'm going to go to UIX graphics image. We'll just leave it as default here. I like the contrast with the red boxes that we're going to do. And so that's our layout slot. And then underneath that, we'll create another child by hitting star. And we're going to go ahead and call this one layout element. This layout element is something that we're going to duplicate to show that the layout is functioning. So we're just going to need to add another component to it, which is the same as the previous one, which is the image. So UIX graphics and image, and then we can make it red. Feel free to use your own colors, by the way. Play around, you know. Again, you can make me some artwork and send it to me if you've got UIX, stuff all lined up. Go for it. So now with layout elements created, we've now got our template here. We're going to be using this template 3 times for each grid layout, each layout. One of the grid layout is one of the ones we'll be covering. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this 3 times. We've got one here. I'm going to go ahead, hit duplicate, and now we've got 3 in the world to play with. I'm going to go ahead and start with object grid layout, which is why I mentioned it earlier, and that's because it's a little bit different to the other 2, and so therefore we can cover it a little bit quicker. So I'm going to go ahead and inspect one of these here. You should have 3 now if you've been following along at home. And underneath the layout slot here, I'm going to go to attach component, UIX layout, and then grid layout. Grid layout will arrange things, oh, this canvas is the wrong way around. It will arrange things in a grid, and it's very, very similar to Object GridAligner. It just has some extra UIX tweaks to it. So you'll see that when I added grid layout, the first rectangle that we added, the layout element, has now appeared in the top left corner here as just a slightly smaller square. Now that square is 64 units by 64 units here. I could increase this by editing this size. I'm going to go ahead and specify this as 100 by 100. And you'll see we now got a larger square here. I'm now going to go ahead and duplicate layout element a bunch. So if you select layout element here and then hit the star a bunch, you'll see that we get duplicates and they go across and they start aligning in a grid. If I don't complete a row, that's fine. It will do it fine. It doesn't look like there are individual elements on here, and that's because I haven't got any spacing. If we go to the middle of this grid layout component, you'll see there's a spacing property and I can enter a spacing value. I'm going to enter 4 for the X, and you'll see we've got those vertical lines. And 4 for the Y, and you'll see we've got those horizontal lines as well, and that's spacing out all of the elements. In addition to this, we can add padding to the layout. Padding will be a common thing you see on all layouts. I'm going to grab the 4 here and putting it all the padding ones. So we put it on the top, you'll now see that we've got a line going along the top, and we can drag it down to the rest of them, and that'll create padding for the rest of them. So there we go, now we've got padding all the way around. You'll now see that we don't quite have a full row here, and that's just the mathematics working out. We can't fit a full even row, so there's this white area left over. What we can do here is we can check the expand width to fit, and what this will do is it will expand things such that they do fit within the horizontal available area. Do know that this will change the dimensions of the layout element beyond what the cell size here is. So you'll see the cell size is 100 by 100. If I go ahead and select the first layout element here, you'll see that it is actually 109 by 109, and that's because it's expanding everything mathematically such that it fits horizontally. If we go back to the layout again, there's a couple of other ways to do this. You'll see that there is also preserve aspect on expand. What this does is preserve the aspect ratio, so you'll see right now that it is a square, so it's preserving the aspect ratio by making the same dimensions on each. You saw 109 and 109. If I were to turn this off, it would keep the layout elements at 100 on the height, but expand it to 109 on the width. Depending on your aspect ratio or your ratio between width and height on your elements within a grid, you might be able to get away with that one. Otherwise, do leave it checked. I'm not quite sure what align last row individually does, so I will skip it. Horizontal line and vertical line will change the alignment. I have trouble with the horizontal line getting it to do anything, but vertical line will change how everything works. Justify is quite nice in that it will space out the rows equally along the vertical height of the container. Bottom will go to the bottom, middle will go to the middle, top will go to the top. You'll see here that the alignment doesn't do anything. I thought it might be to do with the amount of elements that we had in the grid. So if I go ahead and duplicate a few more, I thought it might allow align partially empty grids, but it does not. So I'm not quite sure what that one does. Maybe I'll ask Fruits again for more information on that one. So that is the grid layout. You can use it for gridding things. It's great for, like I said, the inventory. The web browser uses it, so it's great for grids of items. I'll be using it for some grids in a project soon. That's the grid layout. So go ahead and move that one to one side, and then we're going to be covering the vertical and the horizontal layouts. The reason why these are separate from the grid layout in terms of explanation is they use a separate system, sort of. Well, it's a separate component that they use to influence the layout, and they also have some unique properties that are common to both of them that allow for some really quick layouts. So let's go ahead and take a look. We'll do vertical layout first, simply because I want to play around with horizontal layout a little bit more to explain some things in a moment, so we'll start with vertical layout. So here I have another square here that's red. I'm going to go ahead and inspect it. On the layout slot here, we'll attach the component, so attach component UIX layout vertical layout. And you'll see that vertical layout again has the padding properties, so we'll add those. These padding properties, by the way, are a nice way to create a border as well. So if I do 4 in each pixel in each property of padding, you'll see here we've got a nice white border around this red square. Beneath that, there's also a spacing property. Spacing will control the spacing between elements. We don't actually have any elements right now, so I'll leave that blank and we'll come back to it once we've got any elements. We do have one, but there we go. The rest of the properties here, again, are easy to show once I've got elements. Let's go ahead and create some. So I'm going to go to Layout Element and go ahead and duplicate it a bunch. So 1, 2. So now we should have 3 total. There is no spacing, which is why you can't see them. So if I go ahead and set spacing now to 4, you'll see that we've now got them. And because they're vertical layout, they're aligning vertically. Speaking of vertical layouts, everything here on the right-hand side of the inspector is usually aligned using a vertical layout. Each component, so vertical layout, rect, transform, image, is aligned within a vertical layout. So you can start seeing vertical layouts everywhere. And then I believe the individual fields within a component are also aligned with vertical layout. Now I've started talking about these layouts, you can also inspect an inspector and start finding them out in the wild. They teach you some things about how Fruix and the Neos team align UI elements within the inspector and within UI that they're doing. So that is the spacing and padding. We'll now go on to the option down at the bottom here, which is going to confuse you just a little bit, which is the force expand width and force expand height. If I uncheck these, you'll see something weird happens in that the square goes back to a white square. This is because with vertical layout and horizontal layout, it might be the same case with some other layout components. I haven't tried them all. These are the three main ones I see cropping up in UI, but there are some others. They are reliant on child objects within the layout specifying how big they need to be. Some components, such as text within UIX, there may be others, text is the only one I'm aware of currently, will automatically specify their dimensions to the layout container, but these just plain rectangles won't, so we need to do that manually. It's also useful to do this manually if you've got a complicated UI element, such as, you know, a piece of text and a form field and an image and a square. You know, like you might want to do it manually just so you can control the size of everything. So I'll show you how to do that. To do that, the easiest way to do this for our current setup is to go ahead and delete the few layer elements that we've got. So I'm going to delete this one and delete this one. And now we're back to just one. And the reason is so we can edit this one and then duplicate it 3 times, and we'll have back to the same thing. We're going to attach another component to this layer element. We're going to go ahead and attach UIX layout and then layout element, which is conveniently the name of the slot as well. Now, layout element, you'll see, has a bunch of properties, and I am going to go through them. Do bear in mind that half of them are exactly the same as each other. So you'll see min width and min height, preferred width and preferred height, and flexible width and flexible height. So I need to go through those ones. I'll be going through them once, just using the prefix to them, so min, preferred, and flexible. They are the same for width and height. You just need to edit them to your individual tastes based on the width and height requirements of your UI. So min width and min height define the minimum width that this particular element within the layout should be. It will always be this size, even if that causes it to overflow the container of the parent hierarchy. What do I mean by that? If I go ahead and set the min width here to a really large number, so I'm going to go ahead and set this to 2000. And I'm also going to go ahead and set the min height to 2000, which is a very large number. You'll see that we've now got a square which is much larger than the container above it. If I set these back down to 2, you'll see that we've... 2 is probably too small. Let's go 20. Nope, I backspaced. 20 and 20. Where are you at? Did I do something wrong there? Let's go 200. How about that? Oh, it's in the middle. That's why I couldn't see it. There we go. So there it is. There's the 200 by 200 minimum width and minimum height kicking in. So that's minimum width and minimum height. The preferred width and preferred height are the width and height which this element would like to be at. I say would like to be, and that's because there is a negotiation between this layout element and the parent above it and all the hierarchies above it about how big it should usually be. What will happen here is it will try and be the preferred height, and if there isn't room, as in there's no room in the layout for it to flow, for it to be the preferred height, it will try and go somewhere between the minimum height and the preferred height. So you can view it as a maximum height, but it's not exactly a maximum height, it's just sort of a preferred. Like, I'd like to be this big. I'd like another cheeseburger, you know, stuff like that. Beneath that is the, that's preferred width and preferred height. Beneath that is the flexible width and flexible height. Flexible width and flexible height are different from min width and preferred width, etc., in that they are specified using ratios or weights rather than units. In most cases, the units that we're using here, so 200 by 200, are pixels. In most cases, they are very close to pixels, but they're not exactly pixels, and that's because they're within a 3D space, and there is scaling involved, there's transforms involved, there's, you know, screen resolution involved. They're not exactly pixels. They are 200 by 200 units, but you can usually think of them as pixels. But the flexible units are actually ratios. To illustrate those, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set up some flexible widths and flexible heights. To do that, I'm going to reset the min width and min height to -1. -1, by the way, means I don't know, ask someone else. And that's what I'm talking about when we talk about the negotiation that's happening. When it's set to -1, it means like, I'm not specifying it, go ask something else, or you make up my mind for me. So if I set flexible width here to 1, and flexible width and flexible height to 1, you'll see that we've now got a square which takes up all the space again. If I go ahead and duplicate this twice, you'll see that we've now got our rectangles again, as we had before at the start. And that's because each of these is flexible width and flexible height of 1. And what that means is if you add up all the weights together, it's distributing equally between the available space to each of these layout elements. If I were to take this middle layout element, which is the middle rectangle here, and say, hey, the flexible height for this one is actually 2, you would now see it's doubly as high as the other two. So it's assigned more weight to its position and its height. You could do the same on width, but that really won't show much when it comes to the vertical layout, because there isn't much going on here, basically. There would be if we had, additional layouts going on or more complicated hierarchies, etc. So that is the flexible width and flexible height. If you don't specify one of these, for example, so here I'm going to 0 out the flexible width. You'll see that the middle rectangle disappears. But if I go back up to the top here and I check force expand width, it will force the width to expand to the appropriate width to fill the container. So in this case, I've kind of cheated a little bit. You can do this if you're just layouting in one direction. You can just specify the flexible height or just specify the min height, preferred height, and let the force expand width deal with the rest of the width calculations if you're not going to specify them. You can specify all of these, by the way. They'll all work together. It's just if you want to be shorter, faster, or lazier, whichever word you want to use, then you don't have to. You can use that force option. Whilst I'm here, I must explain area and priority. Area isn't currently used. It was meant to be used for UI elements which have both a width and a height to kind of lay out those. It's not currently used. If that gets updated, I will let you know. Priority defines the priority of this layout element's measurements. When I talked about that negotiation earlier, I was talking about how there's a negotiation process and things try and sort of say, hey, I want to be this height, hey, I want to be this height, and the layout above it, the layout container goes, all right, I can give you this, I can give you that. Priority defines the sort of order of operations on how that negotiation happens. When I mentioned text even earlier in this, I said text will automatically specify its width and height. Its priority is 0. Any other elements that automatically specify them are 0. So when you add layout element, it adds a priority of 1, which means it's already higher than 0. You can use priority here if you've got multiple layout element components or multiple layout situations that have the priority field. I haven't really seen much use for it. Beneath that, use 0 metrics allows you to actually enter 0 values in any of these fields. Without that checked, it will ignore 0 fields and it will use fields below it. So a little bit like -1. So that is layout element. I know that was a lot of information, so we'll do the same thing with our horizontal layout, and I'll show you how that works there. I'm going to go back up to the layout here, and I'm going to uncheck force expand width again, because I want to illustrate again. I can't get a horizontal and vertical line to do anything. Again, it might do stuff if we had space left over or something, but I haven't managed to get that to do anything in all the time I've been playing with those layouts. That is the vertical layout. Let's go on to horizontal layout, which is the one I wanted to play with. So horizontal layouts, you can actually see in the inspector again. I believe these buttons at the top here, so red trash can, pink trash can, up arrow, etc. These I think are organized in a horizontal layout. You can also see horizontal layouts in sort of any sort of horizontal button alignment. Even if they're not horizontal layouts, you can see the structure, right? These buttons are equally spaced between each other. They've got an equal amount of spacing. Ignore the slot name next to it. They kind of resemble what we're about to see with the horizontal layout. So to do that, we're going to select the layout here. We're going to go to attach component, UIX layout, horizontal layout. And then we'll go ahead and add the layout element component to here. So UIX layout element here. And I'm going to go ahead and specify the flexible width to be 1. I'll leave flexible height. Let's go back up to layout. I'm going to configure the padding and the spacing to be 4. So 4, 4, 4, 4, and 4. and then we'll turn off force expand width. Nothing should change. And then if we duplicate layout element, you'll see that we now get those horizontal bands that we had at the start of the video. If I go into the, let's delete one so we've got a middle. If I go into the middle here and I change the flexible width here to 2, again, you'll see that we get that thin, thick, thin arrangement, and that's because the same flexible stuff is happening here. Again, I can't figure out the alignment properties here. Again, it might do things with, where we don't have all the space used up. I haven't found a use for these. I usually end up using all the space, and it's common to see all the space being used up. So there you go, that is the horizontal layout, the vertical layout, and the grid layout. Those are the basic layouts. If we go into attach component to UIX layout, you'll see that there's a bunch of other components here. I haven't used some of these, so I won't speak to them. I will make separate videos on them when I look at them. Something that may be of interest is the arc layout. The arc layout is what actually controls the context menus here. I use the arc layout in a few things I've been building recently, but other than that, I haven't used many of these other layout components here, so I'm not quite sure what they do. I will do extra videos on them when I find them out. So that is layouts for you. If you have any questions about layouts, do drop questions in the comments or find me on Discord. If you'd like to see layouts in action, I can also go ahead and go through and inspect with commentary things like the inspector or things like the world browser and talk about how they're working, how they're being laid out. If you used any of my facets, for example, the worlds you're in facet, or the stopwatch facet or the currency converter facet, those do use layouts. You can go through, feel free to take a look at those. Feel free to inspect any UI you can find. Even the MTC, I believe, probably uses layout somewhere. So start taking a look and figuring out how you can align all of your layout elements together. And I'll get back to you next time with another video. I'll speak to you soon. Goodbye.